where this
Yeah.
is a dialogue. This is in part of the dialogue. And so say a minute if somebody has an answer and somebody feels like they need to break the silence. If you're going to break the silence, it can be, I just wanted to recap, would you like me to repeat the question? I just want to make sure. So you're still not moving off of it.
Yes. Oh, Molly, that is so good.
Take the
Not
power
moving.
back.
Yeah, not moving off the question.
Welcome to the Warriors at Work show. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. This is a show for men and women in the workplace who want to move from the predictable to the potent. This is your weekly dose of inspiration with an edge. I talk with CEOs and shamans, sports marketing executives and therapists. All of us are like-minded thinkers and doers who tell stories, share wisdom, and challenge each other to have the best life possible inside and outside the office. Welcome to your Warrior Conversation.
Hey everybody, it's Jeannie. Thank you so much for joining me here at Warriors at Work. This week I'm bringing to you a distinguished security and risk management expert, Molly Blomquist. She's renowned for her strategic leadership in high-stakes environments like Iraq, Pakistan. She has extensive experience in interrogation, negotiation, security strategy, and she's led pivotal roles in the U.S. government. And we talk with her today about one of her favorite topics, the art of interrogation, and how you can use these tactics to improve your decision-making. She breaks this down in such a practical and easy way to follow. We talk about profiles of difficult people. We talk about the power of silence. She gives us some great tips and tricks on reading body language. I think you're going to get a lot out of this conversation and be able to apply it right back into your world at work. Enjoy. Molly Blomquist, thank you so much for joining me here at Warriors at Work. I'm so looking forward to this conversation and getting into you and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited to be here and to see what you're going to ask me for the next 30, 60 minutes. I hope I do it justice.
Well, you have expertise that is something that we just don't talk a lot about in the business realm. However, it is such a key skill and attribute that I know you do a lot of speaking around the country about this idea of the art of interrogation, and we're going to get into this. But what I first want to do is, you have such an interesting story that leads to why you're doing this. So I'd love for you to just take a step back and tell us, why this worked. Did something happen? Did you have a moment where you're like, oh, I'm going to pivot and really dig deeper in this?
Sure. Yeah, and that's a great question. So growing up, I mean, I'll take you way back to the olden days of me growing up. I grew up in southeastern Ohio, so a pretty economically deprived area. A lot of rural rolling farms, just great people, hardworking. And where I grew up, my grandparents lived the house not right next door, but the house over. So about a football field and a half apart. And so growing up, my brother and I would always run back and forth between our home and then our grandparents. And my grandma had 11 other siblings. And one of her siblings, we called him Uncle John. Clearly, he wasn't our uncle, but that's just what we called him.
Mhm.
Uncle John lived in Virginia and he worked for the FBI. He would visit a couple times a year. And I remember, so again, very rural, rolling hills. We had this long gravel driveway. So paved road, it's still a gravel driveway to this day. We still own the family property. And so you would see this car sort of start to crest from the hills, and you could hear the gravel under the tires. And so when we knew when he was coming in, and we were out playing, we had grapevines, we had swings, everything you would imagine growing up in the country. And we would run to him. And of course, because he always brought us candy, so we wanted candy and treats for kids. But he would, after he was settled, he would tell us stories of the FBI, of finding bank robbers, solving crimes, all these things. Now, growing up in that part of Ohio, that part of the country, we didn't travel a lot. So this was my first introduction to a world that was outside of Belmont County, Ohio. And it fascinated me. And I was just mesmerized, and I couldn't wait for him to keep visiting because I wanted more stories. And I'd always be so upset when he would leave because I don't care if the stories were true or false. I mean, I believe that they were true. It just gave me something to aspire to. And so I think from such a young age, I knew I always wanted to be something like my Uncle John. And the irony is he ended up going to law school and then he joined the FBI. So out of high school, then college, I was studying for the LSAT. I wanted to go to law school. I never ended up going to law school. It just didn't feel right. I took a different path to the government, but everything worked out in the end. But that was really where the roots took place, was listening to his stories. And I didn't want to go to bed. I never wanted to leave because he was just such a good storyteller.
And so you took that interest and that fascination and you started to plot your course. You said you took a job in government
Mhm.
and you obviously started doing interrogations. You were steeped into the world of security. How did you know you were actually good at this?
It took a little bit. So, after graduating from college, and again, coming from a blue collar family, when you're at that age, you only know what you know. And so I didn't understand the importance of networking, the importance of sort of laying better foundations. After college, if you remember the old 1980 sitcom Married with Children with Al Bundy,
Mhm.
I was selling shoes, and I thought, oh man, I have a college degree, and here I am selling shoes. Like this isn't what I want to be doing. So I took a federal contracting job in Miami, Florida, for $25,000 a year. I couldn't have been happier. In my mind, I was rich. I was now getting to go to a city that I've never been to, expanding my horizons, starting to go, out and broaden. But to kind of go back to your question, how did I know that I would be good? Well, at first I didn't, but what I can tell you I did know is I wanted to see the world, and I knew that I was going to give it everything I had to be the best that I could. And I just kept applying grit, determination, and perseverance and just studying and being open to feedback. So I probably wasn't so great at first to start, just like anybody learning something new.
Mhm.
But I knew I could get there. Like I just always had that belief. And I loved it. I was so interested in it. And I think too, when you love something and you have an interest, you naturally gravitate and you try harder because it doesn't seem like work to you.
Were you in a meeting or a conversation with somebody at that first job that you realized, "You know what? I'm good at interrogating."
Once I started, so as a newer investigator at that time, once I started being able to go on more trips, so they call them TDYs. Once they were sending me to different cities, different states, and the cases started to become a little bit more complex. And I was one of the more junior investigators doing this. I thought, okay, I think I'm doing okay. I'm on to something. And as the promotions came, it made me think, this is I think I have a gift at this. And then feedback from supervisors or from the quality assurance team, because it goes through a review process for accuracy to make sure the information is fulsome. I always had high ratings, and not everybody does because it's not for everybody. It's definitely, you either like it or you don't. There's really not a lot of in between in it because it can be a grind sometimes, especially when you're junior and you're starting out. I loved it. And
Mm.
so, and with the feedback and the coaching, I just wanted to learn more and more and more. I still learn today.
Let's talk about this word interrogation. So, like, when you and I first met and I read your bio and read the background, I'm like, "The art of interrogation." It feels so intense. It's like a hard charging word, and somehow you've made it work. You've created a whole business model about this and some other things relating to that. So I'd love for you to break it down for us. Like what are the skills needed for this? And how are you connecting it to helping business people make better decisions?
Sure. I think, and you're 100% correct. People hear the word interrogation, and I think their minds go to what they see on TV or what they see in the movies. whether it's an enhanced interrogation technique, it's something that could be harsh or violent or just really bad or evil, right? Like it doesn't really have a good connotation. But when you actually break it down, so it's an emotion invoking word is like a good phrase to say. It's an interview. It's a meeting. You're sitting down with somebody. And the secret to any success is how you do the interview. If the interrogation is contentious, confrontational, aggressive, that's a great way to get somebody not to talk to you. If it feels more like a discussion, an interview, seeking clarification, people are more relaxed. I mean, that's just life. Like, think about it like in your life or somebody like an interaction you've had with somebody. If it's more of an exchange of ideas and a conversation, you're more apt to be willing to participate, even if there's something that you personally maybe don't want to tell them, that you're embarrassed to, or it can be a little hard to speak about. But if you feel comfortable and relaxed, you're going to be more willing to discuss those sharper edges than if somebody is discussing things with you, they're pointing their finger, they're accusing you, or it's just overly aggressive. Most people are going to close off. And they're either going to terminate the interview or they're just going to shut down and they're not going to speak. Either way, you're not achieving your objective. So when you look at TV and movies, I mean, they've done a really great job of glamorizing it. I mean, I wish I were that cool. I can tell you that. Like in real life, it's not as sexy, but it's really effective.
And how does it connect to making better decisions? So if an interrogation is an interview,
Mhm.
first let's look at it. What does Molly do to set the tone for a constructive interrogation?
Sure. So the first thing is you're going to welcome somebody in, you're going to shake their hand, if that's culturally appropriate, right? And so just a quick side note, if somebody has a different background than you, spend 5-10 minutes, get to understand if there's something that's culturally different. So if they're from a different country or they have a different background, you want to be respectful. It's a human being across from you at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
so understanding that is very important, and that pays dividends. And if you want it to be a successful interrogation, it's making them feel comfortable, treating them like they're a human being. That's what I do. Use their name. Everybody likes to hear their name, and especially if you're going to use their name, use their correct name.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many people have called me, clearly my name's Molly. They don't pay attention to my name and they call me Nancy or Marcy or whatever. And that just shows you're not paying attention. Pay attention to the details. And then how it translates to whether it's business success, whether it's in a negotiation, sales. I mean, we'll get into some of the applicability stuff probably a little bit later, I would imagine,
Mhm.
is what interrogation teaches you, if you boil it all down, all the training down, how to ask thoughtful questions, how to come back to questions when necessary, understanding body language, pairing the body language with questions, which is really the secret sauce. And then advanced level, well, as I talk about body language, we all have tells. Understanding your body language and understanding your emotions. If you can control those things, you have such a high chance of controlling an interrogation, a negotiation, sales. People often, when they ask questions, they're just waiting so they can respond again. They're not truly listening to what the other person is saying. Or if they're maybe listening, they're not watching their body language to see how they're responding. 70-80% of all communication is nonverbal. So if we're not paying attention to somebody, to their behavior, we're missing a lot of important clues.
So I want to tease out something you said. You said pairing a question with the nonverbals.
Mhm.
Say more about that. So if you could even give me an example that illuminates your point.
Yeah. So say, for example, you and I, we're in a negotiation that I'm trying to say, I'm trying to sell you something, right? And you're a little bit hesitant, or I'm not sure how that's going to go. I'm asking you, I'll say, okay, well, for this deal, I think our best terms would be 3 months at $25,000, just throwing out just something
Mhm.
generic. And I think this is best for you. Then I list all the reasons. And then I wait for you to respond. You're like, okay, well, I mean, that sounds great. Let me think about it. Then all of a sudden you start to cross your arms, or you're not looking me in the eye. Like, I'm looking for changes of your body language in response to the question.
Mm.
And you don't have to know somebody. I get asked this a lot. I don't know the person. How would I know changes of their body language? Which I think is a great question. And so the answer to that is, you don't have to know them for a year, 6 months, 10 years. When you meet them, notice how they are with you. Are they relaxed? Are they engaged? Do they seem a little bit more introverted? Are they a little bit more closed off? None of that means anything bad. We're all different. But what all of a sudden, if somebody seems like, say we start talking about price and terms, and in that example, you are, prior to that conversation, you're open, you're engaged, and then I'm looking to close the deal. And so I then throw out some terms, some pricing. Well, you're not comfortable with it, but you don't want to quite come out and say it. So you're gonna say, "Oh, let me think about it." Then I see changes. You start to get a little bit closed. Your eye contact changes, and also even rate of speech, which is not a
Mm.
nonverbal. However, when people start to change their rate of speech patterns or how they communicate, those are all signs. And so then you have a couple options. Like, I would have a couple options depending on that scenario. Either I can
Mhm.
say, "Hey, listen, you you seem a little uncomfortable with that. That's just my impression. I could be wrong. Can you just discuss what's on your mind?" And then if I go that route, once I acknowledge what I feel that I have observed, like, I'm not gonna it's very important to the language. I'm not gonna say, "You seemed uncomfortable.
Mm.
I noticed that maybe there was a little bit of uncomfortability or some sensitivity. I could be wrong, but I wanted to bring this up with you and discuss it. What are your thoughts?" It's a much
Mhm.
softer way. And then
The
after us Go ahead.
Now I was gonna say the rate of speech is spot on. When I'm coaching, I do a lot of work around executive communication, and when we speed up, not only does it force our brain to have to work quicker, but we're speaking faster, and so it's harder and harder for the other person to track, and very often what happens is we say things we don't mean. We start to or we
Yes.
have these tells, and so as the person who might be feeling more anxious, so maybe they're on the receiving end of your
Mhm.
questions and they're in the or in the interview with you, if you have awareness into I have a tendency to speed up when I'm nervous, is how can you manage your pacing? What does you need to do to slow it down, which gives your brain more time? So that is so spot on. Such a tell. It's such a tell, by the
Mhm.
way, when we speed up. I'm so curious about particular profiles of people that you come across and have to work with, or and I'm really interested in hearing more about the profile of like the most difficult type of person you've come across when you're in an interrogation, either when you're teaching it or you've been yourself a part of an interaction. So, like, what's the most difficult profile you've had to work with?
I don't think there's one most difficult profile. I'll give you a couple that may surprise you, may not. But I think what most people would say when they hear most difficult, it's going to be somebody who's argumentative, who's dismissive. Those are difficult, but that's just getting to the why. Why is that person argumentative? Why is that person difficult? There's a really, really, really good book. It's called Give and Take by Adam Grant. I
Mhm.
love the guy. Organizational psychologist. He does so much phenomenal work. And the synopsis of the book, there's givers, takers, and matchers. Givers are exactly what you think. They give to other people freely, not expecting anything in return. Matchers match the energy. It's tit for tat. I give you this. Okay, I'm going to give you this in return. Takers, they just want it all.
Mm.
And so when you look at it in terms of an interrogation, a negotiation, a sale, you would think that takers would be the hardest. Takers are the easiest because they, in general, they so want to just talk about themselves, to tell you everything or to show their dominance, their intelligence. You just have to keep asking follow-up questions and you'll get to exactly what they want to say yes.
Mm.
Givers can actually be the hardest in that type of setting because they may give you information, doesn't mean it's going to be relevant, but they're going to give you, oh, you can talk to my aunt, you can talk to my pastor, you can talk to all these things. Like they're giving you all this information, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. They throw out a lot of distraction and dangles. So
Mm.
understanding if somebody's a giver, taker, or a matcher, I think that is extremely important. And ironically, it sort of parlays to the second, what I would say is the most difficult. It's the ones who appear to be nice and cooperative, but they're not. They are the lion in sheep's clothes.
Mhm.
You know, like they are intentionally trying to distract you. The pomp and circumstance, the beating of the chest that some people do, that stuff, that's all just distraction. It's the ones who act like they're intentionally nice and cooperative, and
Mm.
they're looking left and right to try to stall or put you in a different direction. You really have to be on your game.
And so when Molly's on her game and she's dealing with somebody like that, what's your move?
Making sure I'm asking the right questions and then I'm listening. So one of the things that's very important is the power of silence. I ask a question, I'm not speaking until it's answered. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. And so to kind of go back to the sales example where I used you, where I may say, "Hey, you seem a little bit uncomfortable." And say you're sitting there, you're thinking, how do I want to answer this question? What a lot of people, if they were me, they'll just keep talking to make it feel better or to assuage the situation. Stop. Even if it's a minute of silence, do not speak first.
A minute of silence?
Mhm.
Wow. Because I think the technique that I read somewhere is if you ask a question, you count to 7. Or, in best circumstance, when you're leading a group discussion and what do we typically say? Any questions? No? Okay, and we head back to our seat versus what questions do you have? You're supposed to wait 7 seconds, which feels like a long time. I
Well,
can't
but that's also
imagine
at
a
the
minute.
end, right? Like that
Yes,
example
yes, yes,
seems like it's
yes,
at
yes.
like the end of something where this
Yeah.
is this is a dialogue. This is in part of the dialogue. And so say a minute if somebody hasn't answered and somebody feels like they need to break the silence. If you're going to break the silence, it can be, um, I just wanted to recap, would you like me to repeat the question? I just want to make sure. So you're still not moving off of it.
Mm. Yes. Oh, Molly, that is so good.
Take the
Not
power
moving
back.
Yeah, not moving off the question. How do you keep yourself relevant in this space? I mean, because you're thinking about this in a lot of different domains, but is it the world of security? Is it the trends on behavior? Like where do you spend your time making sure you stay relevant and sharp and fresh?
I read a lot. So that's number one. And I get asked a lot of times, like, well, what books do you read? Well, I already gave you one that I love is Give and Take by Adam Grant. And it doesn't have to be the books that'll say how to manipulate people, how to do an interrogation. I mean, those are catchy and I'm sure they have tremendous value. I love work by organizational psychologists. And so I think the applicability across is one. And then second, like when you break down whether it's an interrogation, it's a sales, it's doing a podcast. We talk to people that we know, like, and trust. So it's
Mm.
understanding human behavior and understanding interactions. And another like Another book. So if you ask me this, if I'm jumping a question or something, sorry, just kind of
No,
giving it
no.
in advance. So aside from Adam Grant, another book I love and I always recommend, it's by Dale Carnegie, is How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Because you want people to like you and to talk to you and to feel comfortable. And so other things like to stay relevant is paying attention to the news and the trends. The world, sadly, what I'll say next, it's getting more violent.
Mhm.
And whether that's porch pirates, it's theft, it's acts of mass destruction on a larger scale. We're not becoming a kinder society overall from a security standpoint. And then COVID, for those years of COVID, it really set us back in general of how to communicate with people. I would say basic politeness and just basic social interaction. And that also is when you look at social media now, so many people are just they live like this.
Mm.
And we've lost the art how to communicate effectively, in some ways respectively, with other people. And so having that training, getting that information out to people, I think is critical. I think it's not so much about staying relevant, it's creating awareness of like what you can offer to people, like who don't even know they need it.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It does, and, it makes me think more broadly too when you look at your own life, Molly. So
Mhm.
here you are, you're steeped into this space of helping business people, at least for today's subject around how
Mhm.
you use interrogation to make better decisions, make better choices. When you zoom out, you're also steeped into the world of security.
Yes.
So when Molly looks at her own life, when you think about all that's happening in the world, um, how do you manage yourself with fear and anxiety and all of these external factors that may influence how you see the world? Because you know more than the average Joe when it comes to security and threat and all of the words that feel very, very intense. So like, how do you get your arms around that and manage yourself and continue to leverage it and get stronger in it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. First, I sleep like a baby at night, so I don't stay up. Yeah, no, I sleep really well. I think there is a balance of being aware versus being hyper vigilant or living in fear,
Mm,
and that's a really fine line. And so for me personally, because of my training, and you hit the nail on the head. So what I do is not just training about how the art of interrogation can make you a better negotiator or increase your sales. I also teach security of how to not be a victim. I don't teach you like once you're in the fight, I teach you how to avoid the fight and
mm,
also how to be essentially how to disappear in today's digital society, how to keep a lower profile. When you do those things, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be a victim, but you are lowering your profile.
mhm,
I'll give you an example. This happened to me a year and a half ago in San Francisco. It was a Saturday morning. I was staying at a hotel and I was walking to a conference. And I gave myself about an hour's time. It was only a mile away, but I figured I just want to kind of stroll down, grab a cup
mhm,
of coffee, just enjoy like the crisp morning. Like I
mm,
love cool, crisp mornings. And so I have my backpack. And what's in my backpack? My laptop, identification, valuables. And I'm walking, and across the street, I see this guy kind of walking at my pace, but a little bit just behind me. And so one of the things based on my training that I started to do is I started using storefronts. A lot of storefronts have mirrored glass. And so
mhm,
I could see him without having to turn around. And so
mm,
then I start making turns that are atypical that I would not have taken on my path to go to this conference. And he's following me and he's on the phone. My guess is that's a spotter. He's signaling to somebody else. They physically probably don't want to harm me, but they want to steal my backpack.
mm, mm,
Because also think about crime in major cities, and my backpack is stolen. I'll file an online report probably with the San Francisco Police Department, and then I'll never see that information again. So after kind of seeing that he's staying with me and assessing, like, I think this guy maybe wants my backpack. And, I don't really want to give it to him or whomever he's calling out. I stopped at the next intersection. I turned and I looked at him and I said, I know what you're doing. And then when I held up my phone to take a picture of him, he ran away. And then
Wow.
I went into a store that was open in the morning, grabbed a cup of coffee, sat for a little bit, and then just made sure. And then
Mm,
then I continued walking. Like, I felt safe enough
right.
because I had outed him. I no longer made myself a target. So things that I'll teach is how to help people or groups not make themselves a target. It's simple to me because this is my world and my life, and what my family's had to remind me 1,000 times over, and they continue to, is just because I see it that way doesn't mean the average person does.
Mm,
And so I work with CEOs, companies, sports teams, you name it, to help them understand you can be a public figure, but what you put out there should be intentional. And sometimes too much is too much.
mm.
And also, you want to avoid just making yourself a target just by not paying attention.
So today's social media must blow up your mind every day when you're on there. When you think about all that's happening in the world, whether it's political, whether it's sports and entertainment, there's so much information out there. And I think you just use a really powerful word too, is this word about being intentional rather than losing track and management of what you're trying to put out there. Put some guardrails around it.
100%. And here's the one that I think is one of the simplest tips that people just do not follow. You're on vacation, you're out of town, or you're in town at this really fancy, great restaurant. I promise you, you do not have to post it that second. People will still see it and like it. Wait until you're home because
Mm,
criminals use social media like, oh, this person just posted that they're out at dinner. They may know that your home's unattended. Or if you're out of the country, and I'll use an example. I have a colleague who went on vacation out of the country. Every day was a photo of a beautiful beach location, of what this individual was doing with their family,
mm.
posted in real time. House was unattended. Criminals use this over and over and over to break into homes. Those posts can wait till you get back.
Mm,
It's not worth the loss of your security, your sanity, and your peace. There's
mm.
no amount of likes that can ever replace the loss of security that you'll feel from being robbed.
Well, while we're on that topic, I'd love for you to share with us how your work is having impact. So, when you
Mhm.
think about all the people, the companies, the businesses that you've been in front of, how are you seeing this having an impact?
Yeah, I mean, I would break it down to probably into 2 themes, if I will. So just kinda staying on, like, the not making yourself a target theme. The feedback that I receive is, I've lowered my profile on social media. I'm only posting things that are relevant to my business area, and that has made me feel safe. I've taken steps for things at home or when I travel that you've implemented. I feel like I'm not receiving calls, emails, texts as much as I used to that are scams. So the awareness, which is fantastic. That's exactly what you want. You want people to feel safe. Again, you don't have to live in a bubble. You don't have to go when you walk outside your home. Your head doesn't have to be on a swivel,
Mm,
but you should have a level of awareness. So when I hear that people's essentially their security hygiene, be it digital or physical or travel, is getting cleaned up, they feel more relaxed. It doesn't mean that they've relaxed themselves, but they're more aware of their situation. They're less likely to be a victim of a theft, a robbery, a credit card scam, something like that. So those are real-time results, and that matters. The second is when we talk about interrogation and those interrogation skills, businesses, people that I've worked with have said, my sales have jumped up 30 to 35% from what they were before you to after you,
mm.
because we've implemented this with our sales team. A 35% jump's pretty awesome in my book, and that means that's just an initial. That's not even them refining their processes. So clearly it was about the communication skills, getting to the close, and then the art of the close, right? So that's that's a big thing. And then negotiation, tailored negotiations. People have reported they've closed more deals. I had one company say, our deal rate of closure has shot up 45% using your techniques. I mean, that's incredible. And so it works. You just have to be open to applying it. And I'll say to the companies that have used me, they were very open to it. They were very willing to say, here's what we're doing. We understand there may need to be some TLC in here. And I can lay out the best strategy for you or for a company. But if they're not willing to learn and follow it, you can't expect results. And so that's also a credit to the people I've worked with, that they've been extremely willing to implement the results. And decision-making, we've chatted about that a little bit earlier in this episode, where executives and teams feel like they can make better decisions because they're getting more information, whether it's on a sales call, it's a negotiation, it's an interview, to then use that for their next steps.
So, Molly, if there was one thing that you wanted to make sure everybody who's listening or watching got from this conversation, what's the one thing?
One, I mean, if you're not doing the things that we discussed, I would encourage you to do that. I mean, you're welcome to reach out to me. The one thing is reflect on your overall, whether it's your security, hygiene, or it's your negotiation or interview skills, and assess where you can maybe become better. We're at the end of the day, we're all learning, and there's always things we can continue to improve upon. And that's something that if you're in that constant state of curiosity, you will become better.
I love that. And you know what struck me about what you just said too? We have to slow down, because the slower we are, the more deliberate we can be, the more intentional we can be, the more time we give to the conversation. And that was one thing that really struck me, is about staying on the question. Don't move past the question just because you feel some sense of pressure. And it really resonated with me about this notion of slowing down and being here, being in the conversation.
Yeah.
I feel so much better knowing that you're doing this work in the world and that you're sharing these gifts with the business community. So my last question is this. Look out 18, 24 months. How have you made an impact?
I've helped businesses and I've helped people either become better skilled at negotiations or sales. And if you really, what really would be the bigger impact to me, helping people be safer, like seeing that. And I will share, I've had executives and I've had groups of people write to me and say, I love this. Like there are things I'm cleaning up, but what's even more powerful to me, I've shared it with my children, or I've shared it with parents. Like there's a whole, elder care, scams that go on where they're trying to scam senior citizens. And so hearing that working with me has impacted their families for the better, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
That should be your tagline right there. It's brilliant.
Well, work with me, I help your family. Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful to have met you, to have brought this conversation to my community, and just keep doing it. Keep putting this really, really important stuff out into the world.
And thank you. I mean, I'm honored to be on here. I mean, I was very much looking forward to this, and it has been incredible. So thank you for allowing me on your platform and allowing my voice to be heard to your listeners.
If you are interested in learning more about what we do at the Warriors at Work show and platform, be sure to go over to my website, Jeannie Coomber, and subscribe to my monthly Warrior Playbook newsletter. I share everything that I'm up to month by month, as well as some lessons and insights that I've learned. I'm also interested in hearing any feedback you have about this conversation or future topics. So reach out to me directly on jc@jeanniecoomber.com or on LinkedIn. Be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues about this Warriors at Work conversation. Subscribe, review, and rate us. It's the best way to get this message out into the world. Be well.